and a very, very, very warm welcome to the CMC's International Women's Day Women in Mediation panel. It's so lovely to see so many faces and so many people who've signed up and joined, and to have this wonderful, wonderful panel here. I'm really excited to get started. So we brought International Women's Day to you a little bit early at the CMC this year. And it's so nice that you could all be here. I'm Mia Forbes Pirie. I'm a commercial and workplace mediator, a CMC board member, and along with Martha Clark and Joanna Gosling, we have a plan to bring you more podcasts and panels on interesting topics. So watch this space. And today I have the privilege of being your host. This particular session was born from a suggestion from Zaza, who you can see on the screen, and who you'll get to know a lot better during this session, and from me and a project that I've been working on doing interviews with women in mediation. And you can find some of those on my website, but they will soon be migrating to the CMC's podcast. So that's exciting. And all of these women you see here will be interviewed at some point, so you can see individual interviews with them. My series came from my own experience of being a woman in mediation. And when I was first interested in mediation, having been told that I wouldn't make it as a commercial mediator if I wasn't male and middle-aged. So that's how this all started. And I think at the time it was actually not bad advice and quite a good warning to know that it wasn't going to be an easy ride. We have an amazing panel of really phenomenal and truly inspiring women. And I'm just so pleased to be able to facilitate this panel. I wanted us to pause before we get to know them a little better and just reflect back on the journey of women. And it feels like we've come a really long way. And I remember talking to a woman who was a very ardent feminist, who was quite a bit older than me at some point, and saying to her that I didn't want to be an aggressive feminist. And she said to me, "You can be the way you are, because I was the way I was." And I said, "You are absolutely right." And we became firm friends. So I just want to reflect on the people who've come before us, and the fact that we, all of us here on this panel and all of you participating, are picking up this mantle. This is our time to step up and build a more diverse and inclusive world. So that's our responsibility. I'm sure you know many of the wonderful mediators on this panel quite well and have read their bios. I'm going to just give you a very brief flavor of them, and then we'd love to hear their stories. So we deliberately brought together a panel from a wide range of really interesting backgrounds, very experienced mediators, different levels of experience in commercial mediation, different levels of experience in mediation, and generally coming through different pathways to give you a wonderful flavor of different routes to commercial mediation. I would introduce them with a little bit of information that you might not know so much about them. So we have the chair of the Counterterrorist Advisory Group and a commercial mediator and founder and president of BIMA, Belief in Mediation Arbitration, Zaza Elsheikh. She has been called by far-right extremists the smiling hijabi, which I think she can wear as a badge of honor. And there's some words that Zaza said many years ago, and I'm sure has said many times, that always run through me. And she talks about walking towards prejudice. And I see her really as a living example of that. Maria Arpa, in addition to helping communities bridge divides, training violent criminals to be mediators and being a commercial mediators, she's one of the forerunners of women in mediation. And she has been agile enough to move from one area to the other in mediation. And she was also, a little known fact about her, she used to be a stand-up comedian. And this is something that runs in an interesting way in this panel, because we have a Susanna and a Suzanne, Susanna being the more German name and Suzanne being the more British name. Susanna, who is CEDA's Director of Training and Consultancy and a very experienced business and intercultural trainer, facilitator, mediator, and even a coach. She is originally Namibian. She likes cold water swimming, and she is married to a comedian. So she loves the British sense of humor, and we both have in common that we worked in Mongolia. So lots of different roots and different aspects. And Suzanne, the more British name, is a former litigator. She's now a commercial mediator. And Susanna described Suzanne as one of the most persistent people she has ever met, in a good way. Suzanne has two 10-year-old twins, and so she starts mediating every day before breakfast. And she has an incredible ability to remember restaurant menus. So who knew? We'll see how that comes in handy. I'm now going to turn you over to these wonderful, wonderful women. I don't know who's going to speak first, and ask them to tell us a little bit about their stories, their journey in mediation, and the obstacles related to being a woman, particularly in the field of commercial mediation. So over to you. Who would like to begin? Zaza, go ahead.
So, hi, good afternoon, everybody. I came into the world of mediation having been a medical doctor, then a litigator, not enjoying the win-lose environment that I was in, because I'm very competitive. I love winning, but as a litigator, there would necessarily have to be a loser, and then I'd lose my sleep. And because I had 3 children, I really needed my sleep. So I decided that I needed to look for something that was more win-win, which also sat more comfortably with my religious faith, where championing those who don't have a voice is very important. So as a litigator, sort of silencing one side was very difficult for me. So in terms of coming into commercial mediation, that was in 2006. And I found myself to be, there were not that many women, there were still women were in the minority, but there were definitely a scarcity of women of color. And so I rapidly came to the conclusion that in order for me to compete, and not just as a woman, but as a woman of color as well, that I would have to develop my own niche. Because I was a doctor before, a medical doctor before obstetrics and gynecology, I was able to access those partnership disputes, doctors and as GPs and in hospital teams who weren't speaking to each other, all sorts of conflicts, you know, there was just loads. And so that's where I started. And in terms of the challenges, I think that the main challenges have been around, for instance, just a tiny one to share to just illustrate the point, that when people would ring the office, so parties, potential parties would call the office, and they would say, "Can I speak to Dr. Elsheikh?" And I'd say, "Yes, speaking." And then there would be a pause, and then I'd say, "Hello?" And they'd say, "Yes. Is Dr. Elsheikh there?" Because they expected Dr. Elsheikh to be a man rather than a woman. So the gender neutral title was helpful to get the parties sort of to contact, but you know, there were some who were disappointed that oh, okay, it's a woman. And then there are, you know, a huge other number of, let's say, disappointments that people would have to overcome, such as the fact that I'm overtly Muslim, Black as well. And so there were lots of surprises for them, because speaking to me over the phone didn't betray that. They didn't realize that I was Black and overtly Muslim as well. So there were a couple of funny scenarios that happened along the way, which I might have time to share later. So thank you. Thank you. over to whoever else wants to speak.
Thank you, Zaza. In our pre-meeting, everyone was jumping in, so
I
jump in, don't be shy.
I just go next. Yeah, so I tell a little story. It plays in the south of France, and I was interning at the time. So I'm a lawyer, specialized European law, international law, French and Spanish civil law, because I found law not exciting enough, so I had to add some language dimension. So I was interning in lovely south of France with Maître Blanc, a lawyer there, who is a good friend of mine. And we were, after a very intense day in the criminal court, so we did all sorts of cases, workplace, labor disputes, criminal, divorce, everything. We sat down, you know, you can imagine under these nice trees, sun, you had your lovely meal. And then he said, Suzanne, I just want to share a remark, if you may. I think you should stop with law and start something that makes you really happy. Because what I see, you're an excellent lawyer, you do everything perfectly, but you don't like the drama. And to go to court means you have to create drama. And if you are a lawyer, you have to create positive and negative, and you need to bill hours, and that means you have to create those nasty letters you send to the parties and stuff like that. But the clients I send to you leave quicker, pay less money, and they seem to be happier. So there might be something in it, what you might to embrace. So of course it was one of those truths that, you know, later they were really important that someone shared that with you. And so I followed my vocation and embarked on this 1 year long, because I'm German, 1 year long journey, because to become a mediator in Germany means 220 hours. And it's 1 year, so you basically take every aspect of mediation. And I specialized in intercultural mediation, because for me it was clear if I really want to do something in that area, it has to be with cultures. So once I've done that, I actually then already decided I cannot go back to become a lawyer or be a lawyer anymore. That was for me mutually exclusive at the time. So I started out being a mediator for lots of different things, mainly community conflicts, like city and a community building a playground or swimming pools, but also divorce mediation. And until I got into which I know now that it's commercial mediation. It was between organizations and in organizations. So helping joint ventures and intercultural disputes, meaning if you have a merger and acquisition, you actually have two cultures coming together and you have to help them. So that is what I specialized in, was really in helping individuals and teams in organizations to manage conflict better, and it not only through mediation, but actually from preventing it to, like I call it, small C to big C conflicts, up to being involved actually now in peacemaking. I didn't know that commercial mediation existed at the time, so I worked all over the world until I found CEDAR in London, and they asked me for a project and said, yeah, it was in Senegal, if you go there, you need to be CEDAR accredited. And I thought, well, I've been mediating for 15 years. I have a Swiss accreditation, a German accreditation, a French and Spanish. So what else? No, it's something else. So I did that training, was super nervous, because if you, after you're already a mediator, think, okay, I'm tested again, learning a completely new way how to mediate in private meetings was a shock to my system, and having lawyers in the room. Well, I was used to lawyers, but that they can play such a role like they do in the UK was, which I'm enjoying now. At the time, it was fairly stressful. I really could say I embraced that way to mediate in private meetings and put it into my practice to complete actually the whole methodology and toolkit that is now at my disposal. So yeah, I'm enjoying now to doing the whole bandwidth of mediation, and I wouldn't even call it commercial anymore. Yes, there's a commercial aspect, but every mediation is about people. And we talk about that later as well. So I pause here now and hand over to Maria or Susanne, whoever feels brave enough to continue now.
Maria, do you want to go next?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to...
Go on then. I'll take the mantle. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really an honour to be invited to do this, and I've been around a while and seen it all from various angles. I came into mediation, I was busy running an advertising agency and telling everyone what to do and bossing everyone around, and then doing stand-up comedy in the evenings because I'd become so bored with my advertising agency. And I reached this point in my late 30s where I thought I really got to find something else, something that has more meaning and purpose, you know, as the kids were getting a little bit older and stuff. And I discovered community mediation. And I actually was trained by a woman, an amazing Black woman called Sonia Reid, who at that time was running the local Brent mediation service. And I became a sort of addicted almost to these neighbour disputes. I just found it absolutely fascinating. But I also came across Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and I also became a Reiki master. So I had this whole kind of hodgepodge, this whole kind of cocktail, and decided to kind of just really go with this, to go with the flow. And so much so, I mean, there's just so much to say. I wouldn't, you know, I'm going to try and keep it short, obviously. But, you know, we ended up, you know, working with gangs. I ended up working in my local area. I moved into Brent, local in Kensal Rise in northwest London. There were lots of gang issues. I ended up shadowing somebody and working with gangs and dealing with people who've got guns in their pockets. I was mediating in my front room. I opened my house to the community. And it never occurred to me that I couldn't do this because I'm a woman. And I suppose there's something about that for me, you know, I mean, without getting all sorts of spiritual and tree hugging, you know, I'm a soul, and my soul happens to reside in a female body. So there was never anything that said to me, oh, I can't do this or pursue this. And then in 2010, so how I came into commercial and family was in 2010, their austerity measures, Tory government came in, we lost all our funding overnight. And, you know, when you're mediating in your front room, well, we had an office and everything, everyone's gone. And David and I, my husband, who I trained as a mediator, and then we ended up in a romantic relationship. So I know this stuff works. You know, we just carried on because you can't ring people up who are in danger and say, oh, I'm not getting a salary this month, so I'm afraid, you know, your son might die at the hands of another gang, you know. And we kept going to the point where we were nearly broke, just living on our savings. And then I put a call out to the industry and said, we're struggling. The industry gathered around us. It was really very, I mean, it still sort of chokes me up because what was then, was it 218 The Strand, Jonathan Dingle welcomed us and trained us without, you know, for free. He gave us the training and helped us to enter that world. And what was then the ADR group also did the same thing and gave us our family so that we could actually start earning fees and build a fee generating mediation service, which was a really big part of the model, that those people that can't afford to pay, or, you know, this isn't on their radar or whatever, we could service that through the charitable aspect of our work. But we could also put our skills on display and generate fees from those people that can afford to pay. And it did astonish me, you know, that the world of commercial mediator is populated by a lot of middle-aged white men, and that women it is tougher to get in. But, you know, as I said, it just never occurs to, when I've set my mind to do something, it just never occurs to me that I can't do it. So I just work with that kind of energy flow. I've mediated, I think I really resonated with Susanne when you said, you know, commercial mediation is mediation. I think that the difference is that sometimes, you know, if people have got themselves, you know, they've got their knickers in a twist and they're having to sort out a problem that they've dug themselves a hole so deep they can't get out of, and they may have a court date, you know, it is a service to people to help them to negotiate something so that they can, you know, close that chapter of their lives. And so sometimes I feel really, I get very moved and I feel really sad that it didn't come into mediation from a different way, especially when the parties have been known each other a long time and it isn't, you know, an oil company and a country, you know, those kind of more lower level stuff that, you know, people end up going down the legal route where they should never ever have gone that way. And I've got lots of cases, and I think that's, you know, so I love this world. I think we've done a really good job in this world. I think there's plenty of places to go, but it's certainly altered a lot since when I first started. So thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Suzanne.
So I was a commercial litigator at Hogan Lovells for almost 14 years, but you know, a number of years before we got to 14 years, I was asking myself what I wanted to do long term, and I really enjoyed being a litigator. I loved that you get to get your head around completely new factual matrix, new law, new clients. I really enjoyed when we got to negotiate and resolve things, but it became clearer and clearer to me that I loved the beginning and I loved it when I could resolve something at the end, but I wasn't convinced that the role I was playing in the middle was the most beneficial to the parties, wasn't the most commercial in all instances, and also didn't deploy the skills that I enjoyed using and thought I was best at. And I explained to a group of people I was talking to a few weeks ago that I have this thing where I will think about what I'm going to think looking back when I'm 60. And it became really clear to me that when I look back at 60, if I've become a partner in a city law firm, that will to some extent be a bit of a Pyrrhic victory because it's not what I want. And it may, I'm not saying it's easy to be a partner in a city law firm, but it wouldn't have fulfilled ultimately what I wanted to achieve. And so I started to unpick what that was and what that could look like. And it became clearer and clearer to me that what I wanted to do was to play the role of the commercial mediator. But then the challenge was that my preconception of what that person looked like and was a kind of elder statesman. And I knew that I was getting grey hair, but I was dyeing it. So I didn't tick that box, well, at least to the outside world, that I wasn't a man, and that I hadn't been a senior partner in a city law firm or in a law firm, and I hadn't been a QC. So, you know, how was I going to overcome that? And what I actually did was I emailed Kate Jackson. I knew that she existed, and she emailed me back instantly and said, call me now. And I called her back. I mean, it had taken me a while to get to the confidence to email her, but she did say, call me back now. And she said to me, the situation you're in is no different to where I was sitting. I was at Allen and Overy, you're at Hogan Lovells, you're working a very similar kind of practice to me. There is no reason why you can't achieve this. And they often say you can't be what you can't see. I could see it. So I then started to think, okay, can I actually really do this? And when it came to having my appraisal, I told the partners, this is what I wanted to do. And they said to me, well, that's not a business case for partnership, is it, Suzanne? So maybe you want to reflect and not tell us that, because you don't need to. And I said, no, because if I don't tell you, I will plow on. I'm that kind of person, but I will end up going down a route that I don't want to be on. And I said to them, this is what I want to do. I want to carry on working here, but I want to get accredited as a mediator. I want to start doing mediations. Kate had said to me that I should become accredited as a community mediator as well, because that would teach me tons and I would find, you know, great satisfaction, which I did, and I did that with calm. And I continued on that path for quite a long time. And then I said to the firm, you know, I'm never going to be able to build this practice whilst I'm here. and I'd saved money for quite a few years by this point. And I'd realized that becoming a mediator, for me at least, meant creating a startup. I was not going to be able to get a job as a mediator, but I was going to have to build something. And so at a certain point, I took the plunge and said, okay, I will leave the protection of the law firm and my salary, and I will create my dream, I suppose. And that's the journey that I've been on now since 2019. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I promised you a diverse group of women who came to mediation from diverse routes and who had inspiring stories. And I think that I don't feel at all disappointed. And I feel this common thread throughout all mediators, and it came so clearly through your stories, of it feels like a calling. It feels like the thing that we must do. And I often compare mediation to being an actor, because no one chooses to be an actor because they know for sure they're going to make a lot of money. It's because it feels like this is what you really, really want to do, and this is the thing for you. So we're talking about women, we're in the commercial context. So let's look at this commercial context. There are many types of mediation where there are lots more women, for example, family mediation, community mediation. What is it about the commercial world, and in particular the world of commercial mediator, that makes it more challenging for women? So what's the context we're operating? What are the biases in this area? And please, if the panel all come off mute and just chat the way we do when 74 people are not watching us.
So I think that for me, the one of the major challenges is whichever area of mediation that in terms of the more traditional ethnic minorities, that being a woman as a mediator can only be imagined, only be contemplated if there's a woman as a party. So if it's an all-male dispute, all the parties are male, it's almost unconscionable to have a woman be the mediator, and certainly not an arbitrator. And so when I compared and contrasted this with, let's say, the more mainstream areas of mediation, so rather than the ethnic minorities, those referrals from those communities, I found that what I've started out by saying, which was that when people are in conflict, I totally understand that they're looking for sameness. They're looking for that sameness when they are feeling vulnerable and conflicted and angry and sad, and all the difficult emotions are flowing. And so I think that when faced with the possibility of me mediating, not only being a woman, but the race and the religious faith as well, that those are additional challenges. And you mentioned earlier, Mia, thank you for doing so, that, you know, my mantra has always been walking towards prejudice, because I've been born into prejudice, and my maternal lineage is Caribbean, Jamaican, and my paternal is African from Sudan. And so already just my birth into a Christian, Muslim, Caribbean, African with the Arab culture and so on, there was already a conflict and a lot of prejudice. So my message to everybody today, whether just as a woman or with additional intersectionality like I have, just to walk towards it, as in you acknowledge that there may be some resistance to who you are and what you are, but to really be yourself and just keep marching on. So when somebody has said to me that, you know, I don't think you're the appropriate mediator for this case, and I've not said, oh, is it because I'm Black, or is it because I'm a woman? I've just said, really, what's the problem? You know, and got them to say what it is, you know, and invariably they don't say it's because I'm a woman, they don't say it's because I'm Black or that I'm Muslim. They say, oh, it's because we think that perhaps it should be somebody who's legally trained, because you're a doctor, aren't you? And then you feel so sympathetic for them because they've clearly not read the profile. So I'll stop there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zaza. I love that. Sort of, there are areas that are more difficult than commercial for women, and intersectionality. We're looking for sameness in conflict, that comfort, and this mantra that has served you so well and that can serve us all so well, of walking towards prejudice, being yourself. And I love your question, really. Tell me more, what's the problem? Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. So what do other people think in terms of this context? What are the barriers in this specific commercial context?
I think, so I've sat in the role of being a commercial litigator for quite a long time, longer than I've sat in the role of being the commercial mediator. What it seems to me is that, first of all, lawyers are risk averse. I mean, that's their job. And you want to be able to demonstrate that you have the best possible mediator for the job. And I think that often means being able to demonstrate that somebody is tried and tested, so they're experienced, but also being able to set the scene of what somebody has done before to give them credibility. And I think that that is sometimes easier to do. And if you are dealing with somebody who you can say, well, this person was, the senior partner of this firm, and they were all these different things, and they've mediated 100 disputes or more, and then we're proposing them. And you can justify that to your client. There's no risk and exposure of having got it wrong in theory. And I'm not saying that those individuals can't do a good job at all, but I think that sometimes it's harder, particularly with certain clients, or perceived to be all a lot about perception, if you present somebody based on skills and attributes and what you think they will actually be able to bring to the mediation. I don't think that's often the conversations that are taking place to the same. It's safer to go with the safe bet.
So we've got these risk-averse lawyers and wanting this tried and tested, and the tried and tested mainly sort of tend to fall into this camp of sort of white men. And yeah, we're not always looking at who is the best possible mediator for a situation. We're looking for these badges. And it's interesting that it's that being really good at what you do is maybe not enough in this sector. We need this kind of tried and tested and used over and over again, almost in a sense, actually, for lawyers to be able to defend themselves to their clients, to be able to say, if something goes wrong, well, we've worked with this person so many times before. So yeah. Other thoughts on this commercial context?
So I found that one of the things that mediators don't learn anything about is marketing. And, marketing is really important. Many people spend thousands of pounds on, very good or mediocre training, depending where you go, and come out the other side and think that they can just put their names on panels or whatever. And it's not like plumbing, if everybody needs a plumber, so you're going to go out and look on Facebook or whatever and find yourself a plumber, and if he's good, you'll use him again, or if she's good, you'll use them again. So one of the things that I found is you've got to get out and start networking. I mean, now, we have certain lawyers that come back to us time and time again because they like what we did, and it's that whole safe bet. But to get that relationship to begin, you've got to go out and look for people to network with and build relationships with, and demonstrate that even in that one-to-one relationship building conversation, there's something about you. It's not, you can't just do training and then sit and wait for anybody to hire you. There's I always say, when I work in this field, I always say to anyone that wants to run a private practice of any description, 30% of your time is networking, 30% of your time, or 33 point whatever it is, recurring, right? Should have just said a third. Right? A third of your time is networking and showing up and, you know, talking to people and building relationships. And a third of your time is doing things pro bono and giving back, firstly to give back, but also to put yourself on show. And a third of your time is doing paid work. That's how it works. And it takes 2 years from the day that you say, I mean, I teach this in my year-long dialogue roadmap training. From the day that you say, this is what I want to do, and I'm really clear that nothing's going to get in my way, it takes 2 years to build a practice. So most people won't give it that time. I mean, I heard you, Suzanne, say you gave up the safety of the job and everything. So you rowed away from the riverbank and you went into the middle of the stream and allowed, you know, you felt safe in the current. But most people won't do that. Most people believe that you can hold on to what you've got and somehow build your way into something new. But I mean, I'm probably one of those people. I don't know how many people there are actually in the industry. Years ago, it was very, very few of us who were actually able to earn our income full time by doing this type of work. So there's lots of trust issues here.
So we need the courage to move away from the riverbank, row into the center of the stream, give it 2 years fully focused. And I think it's interesting what you're saying about marketing and networking and building relationships, because it's not like another career. It's not like being a lawyer or being a plumber. There's no training contract. There's no one else sort of getting you work until you build up to the point when maybe you're on certain panels. But really you're your own marketing machine. So being a mediator in a sense means being an entrepreneur, and you're marketing in this environment that's sort of favorable to men, although there's a lot of female lawyers. So where does that put us? But we'll come back to that later.
Well, Kenneth Cloke said, I don't know if you're familiar with Kenneth Cloke, but Kenneth Cloke said, you mediate your way into work.
You mediate your way into work.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
So I want to come back to actually how our mediation skills help, but I want to hear Susanna's take, because I know she has some interesting points on mediation coming from a different country and looking into our commercial mediation world. Susanna.
Yeah, so and I agree totally with Maria. I think that is what we always say to mediators. You have to make a decision, are you an entrepreneur or not? I think what I realized when I came to the UK, having a lot of experience, let's say, on the so-called continent, alone that there's a separation between the continent and the UK means there is quite a microclimate when it comes to commercial mediation on this island, which I think is not only a women issue, but also a class issue. And because it's bound to the legal world, it's very complex to move between the classes. So that will also determine how you think and your self-efficacy, what you think you are capable to do or not, and the role models you will have or not. So when I started with my career, I had lots of female role models around me who wouldn't even doubt, exactly, we didn't even label commercial mediation. There were all sorts of mediation out there, and you would find your niche. And normally there would be more, lawyers weren't as trusted as mediators. It was actually more difficult to be a lawyer. So I almost always said my second degree is a linguist, applied linguist. That got me better into the mediation world of getting the gigs than actually saying I'm a lawyer. And it was more about defining what is it that you are really good at, and not, you could call it mediation. So that was often, except family mediation, I would keep that apart because there are very specific rules you need to know. And I think to be a family mediator, you have to follow a certain training, because I think there's a lot in jurisdictions which is quite specific. But so I had these role models, females and males, where I could get my inspiration, or in a lot in Switzerland and Germany and in France, you have to have a supervisor if you're mediating. So you have always someone, and I still have my same supervisor, Consolata. She's an Italian living in Germany, and I debrief with her on a regular basis what I'm doing, to also reflect, am I still on the path I want to be? And there's some difficult cases, which also I think is quite important. And co-mediation is also something that is much more practiced. So here you are really alone. So if you are not part of the top class, and forgive me all British people here if I just call this out, I'm possibly the Kate Fox watching the English here. And I watched the English, I studied them, because people like me are the odd ones out. It doesn't mean I'm experienced, if I can say, discrimination here as well, as a German, as a woman, as a German woman, not being old enough, or all sorts of stuff. But one thing, I'm an outsider, I'm not part of any class. So I possibly got more access to some mediations because people couldn't put me in a box and said, okay, she's possibly the one who can make the difference because she doesn't behave and she has this strange accent and she doesn't use all the metaphors. I got once the feedback from a barrister saying, so refreshing that you use simple English. Well, I can't actually speak other English. And that you just paraphrase a message so clearly that actually I can understand it. So thank you for that. It was, for me, now I know it was one of the biggest compliments you can get from a barrister who are almost all caught in their own world. So I just want to throw that into the mix, because we are, like also Zaza said, we are more than the sums, more the sum of the parts who we are as women. We also have our cultural baggage, and we have the national context as well to overcome. So I just would invite into our thinking, because there is one wise word I got from a female leader, said the big advantage you have, Susanne, is you are where you are because of merit and not because of your networks, not because of your boarding school or whatever, because a lot of men have to suffer from imposter syndrome because they can never be sure, am I here because I'm good? But we women can often, well, I think most of the time say, yeah, it's because we are who we are. That doesn't mean that we don't have to network and actually look and learn from what men are doing well, because a lot of men doing things well, and a lot of men open doors for me so that I can be who I am now. So I'm very grateful for a lot of sponsors and allies I had along the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's so interesting to have this sort of outside perspective on our culture. And I think as British people, we rarely mention the bias of class. It's sort of the hidden thing that people don't talk about. So I think it's really useful to have that brought out in the open. And I think you bring us into a really interesting question of support. Who opens doors for us? How can people open doors for us? So who supported all of you and encouraged you, and how opened doors, if any? We've heard a little bit already.
So when I started out, I set up Commercial and Medical Dispute Solutions, which was a limited liability partnership with my friend, Kathy Torman. We had trained separately, but similar times. And we just carved out the niche. We carved out the niche as the words, the name of the entity suggested, commercial and medical. And we went with that. And along the way, other support came forward to be able to go into other areas, so to use mediation skills in other ways. So I thought that I'd just touch on that now, because in the introduction you mentioned about the counterterrorism world. And so in 2017, was fortunate enough to be able to present on the behalf of the UK about how mediators could be used in rehabilitating offenders, as well as those who are at risk of radicalization. And I'd also worked in schools already, and my in for that was the understanding, because I have a son, a very special son, Ali, who has very severe learning difficulties. And I think that that is one of the ways in which I've been able to practice being a mediator, an effective mediator, because I've had to be able to listen and decipher far more acutely for many, many years. And so in terms of supporters, I would say that I've had men and women. I have to be very candid and say all of them have been white, because there have not been other a sufficient number of other races of mediators around to be able to, you know, lift me up, so to speak. So I am, of course, indebted to all those who have helped me along, and particularly in BEMA, that I've had lots of support for its outset in 2012 from the likes of the late and very dear David Richbell and Paul Randolph, who were giants and very close friends. I would say more than friends, the sort of uncle, the traditional uncle figure who I would go to, and Stephen Ruttell, and many, many, many more, but all white men. And so what I really want to be clear about is that we owe so much to white men. We may talk about the male stale pale and so on, which I'm not entirely comfortable with, because those are the people who have definitely lifted me up, held my hand, and ushered me alongside them.
I feel similarly, sort of, that I've been very fortunate to have the support from some sort of prominent white male mediators, but I think early on it's also very hard. And for me, it was the first barrister actually who trained me as a mediator, who I think now has been disbarred, so I'm not sure what happened there. But he said to me, you know, you really get this, and you really have something special, and you need to carry on. Whatever you do, you need to make sure you use the skill. And I think, you know, these words are things that we all need on this tough journey. So I'm just wondering if other people have similar experiences. Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, I'm really touched by what you said, Zaza. And, you know, we've crossed paths many times. And I just really want to, and I do want to give a shout out to some of the people you use the phrase lifted me up, but who've listened to me, you know, who've actually taken note and validated and recognised my work. And, you know, top of my list, number one is Stephen Ruttell. I mean, that man is a genius and a saint, and deserves all the recognition, you know, and he doesn't want it, you know, so, you know, but there we are. I love Stephen. Sir Henry Brooke, when he was around, he was chair of the CMC at one point, and he made, when we were struggling, he made a big donation to the charity, and that time before I'd ever thought of asking anyone for donations, you know. Bill Wood, another Bill Wood QC, Bill Marsh, David Richbell, God rest his soul, Jonathan Dingle, it's been a really big support, David Liddell, and that's a different strand, but, you know, he's shown me a lot of respect. Dave Owen, who runs the Mediators Breakfast Club, Andrew Goodman, who is a star in his own right, and Paul Rose, who Andrew and Paul both came on as trustees of the Centre for Peaceful Solutions when I desperately needed trustees. So yeah, I think that it's really important that while we're discussing, you know, how women can get into this world and what we have to offer and all the rest of it, the men have not created barriers for us.
Yeah.
This is our work.
Yeah, I want to hear from everybody else on the panel. I also just want to say, anyone who is participating on this call, there's 75 of you, please pop a note in if you have a comment, a question, an experience that you want to share. Let us know about it, because we'd like to hear from you as well. Yeah. And anybody else on support, rather than maybe names, more experiences of that.
So I think I was lucky because I had and have had what I would describe as cheerleaders, in the fact that they have always taken my calls. They've always been there to kind of encourage me. And also I know that I'm really lucky, and I factored this in when I decided to do this, that I have a network within the commercial legal world. So when I kind of was at Lovells, I thought to myself, well, one of the things I'm already doing is training for clients and internally on the skills you need to kind of get the most out of mediation. I was already doing that there. And so many people have welcomed me kind of into their firms to provide training to them and to develop relationships with other people in their firms or their banks, or whatever it may be, to further develop those relationships, which I think, you know, those are doors that have been open to me because of I have those relationships, or because I've created those relationships through LinkedIn or whatever that may be. But people have been encouraging in that way, and allowed me to build a brand of some kind. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as say a proper brand, but something that they know who I am. More people know that I am a mediator and that I could help them.
I think as entrepreneurs, we do have a brand. As mediators, entrepreneurs, there is a brand. Susanne.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's important to have relationships and also ask. I think something, especially me, I always thought I'm strong enough, I can do this alone, not accepting. It's important to ask people. And I was really inspired that a lot of them, that there are some significant mediators that would never see themselves as that. They're actually quite generous in sharing, just even offering a co-mediation or being listening, as Maria said. And it's also something where you have to find some of the sponsors, people who really sign up to you and push you, or even looking for some coaching in terms of how do I see myself, or what is it that, so I think it's about being congruent of what you offer as the mediator, because you have to be the process manager, etc. You have to be that as well. You have to actually be that. You have to own your own capabilities. So to find sponsors who do that in your business, in your environment, friends, and surround yourselves by, to what Susanne said, I think is so great, that you can see who you are. So I can name all over the world people I work with, or even when you give training or you are in mediation sessions, ask for feedback every single time a client. So what, how does that feel, or how did you like that? And every single piece of feedback will help you to grow. And yeah, so I'm just saying there is, I have some people in mind, which nobody would know because they're from different worlds. But one is actually, I name drop that now, is actually Arun Gandhi, who I had the pleasure to talk to. And it was one of those most humble experiences where where he basically just sat there and said, okay, tell me who you are, and just listening and then reflecting back what they heard and what they think I am, or my values are, and capture that. And I have a book I always take with me and write all the feedback, everything I hear down, and reflect on a regular basis on it. Because in the end, you have to be your own sponsor then, and to reflect, is that what I want to become? Am I because there are also a lot of commercial mediators who become perhaps not what they set out to become. I think you have to be quite aware of, this is what I want to do with me and with my life and with my skills. and to reflect on that and actually be true to yourself. Is that, or am I now selling my soul? I think that's quite crucial as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we need to ask. I'm going to take that as a mantra. We have a comment from Julia Burns, who says, often the barriers of female instructing lawyers who often seem to recommend male mediators to their clients. There's still more male senior lawyers who I think often, in Scotland anyway, have more say over the choice of mediator. And my experience is very similar to Suzanne's. Ooh, it jumped. That the safe option is often a white man, in mediation being their second career. And even where the senior lawyers are female, they often default to who they know best. The male mediators, I think, will change in time, but I do feel it remains a barrier. Victoria Harris is saying volunteering for your local community mediation organization could help build your mediation network and develop useful connections. And Roger Levitt would like me to ask you, what is...
You've got on to mute.
I'm not sure how I got muted. What is it that the CMC can do to help women in mediation? So that's my next question.
So Roger and I actually started this conversation maybe about 3 months ago, something like that. We were talking about diversity and feeling that CMC was the best place to start, to have that kind of platform to really highlight the lack of diversity currently. And so I think my suggestion to Roger was, well, let's go with the easiest first. Let's go with increasing the number of women who are appointed. So I think that it's really important for us to make the distinction between women who are mediators and women who are appointed, because it's that appointment where the disparity is.
Yeah.
And in terms of what the CMC could do to lead the way, would be to have events such as this for lawyers, so for appointing lawyers within a firm, to have a panel, to have discussion about what is it? Is it as simple as sameness? Is it more complex, and it's about not the fear of losing face for a female lawyer who is appointing, that she's just worried that, you know, it might be safer to have a man than a woman, even though she's a woman. You know, what is it to allow that sort of non-judgmental, as we do as mediators, expression of what are the anxieties? Because I don't think it's there's any question about us not being intellectual enough or not being agile enough, because so many female mediators, almost out of necessity, have so many more bells and whistles, you know, the languages, the previous professional backgrounds to bring to the table. So there is some things that are causing the resistance. It's not that women are just assumed not to be able as male mediators. There's an actual resistance, in my view.
Thank you. So we will circulate this to lawyers. And I love that question. What are the anxieties? I think that's a very powerful question. Maria, you raised your hand.
Yes, I think that, you know, as if we're talking about the lawyers that, you know, appoint the mediators, and I think that's a good point, Zaza, that it's not about having more women mediators, it's having more women mediators that are appointed into cases. But, you know, one thing that's really important to do is find your niche and become that person for those situations. You can't mediate everything anyway. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and choose what you want to do. Like, so, you know, I'm really known if it's high conflict, if it's, you know, really intractable, you know, that's, you know, we've been given cases that other mediators have turned away. So you know, so find your niche, say this is where you would really benefit from using me with these types of participants and these types of cases. So, you know, as I said, I've got no illusions. No one's ever going to hire me to mediate a multi-million-pound oil spill. But all those, and I really wouldn't want to do that anyway. But what I love are those smaller cases where there are, you know, there've been previous relationships and they've ended up going down the legal route by mistake because that's all they knew what to do, you know, and I'm known for that, you know, so that's a really, you know, find your niche and say, this is who I am and what I can do in this situation, because you can't do all of it anyway.
Thank you. That's a great tip. Find your niche. Susanna, did you want to add anything? Because I have another question from Rebecca Clark, and then I'd like to close with one question. We've only got 10 minutes left.
I think that the niche thing, definitely. And also, I think you have to disrupt. You have to find a style. So, for example, I always mention, I'm not for you if. I have a certain style. I call myself also the provocative mediator. It's not for everyone. So I think it's also to promote that. And I remember that Suzanne, and it might be Zaza, it might be all of you mentioned that in your respective circles, actually it was Zaza and Suzanne, you wouldn't even be considered because you're female. And if I think when I'm going back to Namibia, and I was with the San Bushman for some time to learn about mediation and the palaver technique, it's also only male people who are leading that. So whilst it is quite an interesting process, I think this whole idea of elders and mediators is something that is possibly well, you have to ask an anthropologist. I have no statistics here, but there is possibly this idea, and gravitas, Rebecca mentioned that. I think it might be interesting to have discussion groups with everyone on the table, say, what does it actually mean? And what is this fear of failure of a female or young or whatever mediator? What can go wrong? Everything has gone already wrong because the conflict is there. So to actually invent new narratives, because I think here it's a single story approach and we need multiple stories to tell, and different people from different areas to tell them. So I think it's encouraging that kind of discussions, but also I'm aware that a lot of people are listening and are burning perhaps to say things, is how can we just create a healthy debate, which is not polarized, but actually a mediation, a huge mediation.
I love it. So just in the interest of time, Sonal has said, oh, Zaza disappeared. I hope she'll come back. Sonal has said interactive sessions like these with practical tips to discuss and share experiences would encourage and help. So you're going to have to come back, ladies, and give practical tips, more practical tips. Rebecca's saying, which is a sort of a comment / question, there seems to be something about older male mediators having more gravitas. Is gravitas considered an acceptable excuse for bias? And I think Susanna touched on that in her answer. Nikki Edwards says, as a lawyer, I think it's difficult to put forward a mediator that you've never seen in practice. And so one thing experienced mediators can do is to help invite female mediators to co-mediate where appropriate. Thank you, Nikki. That's a really great suggestion. Okay, I'm hoping Zaza is going to rejoin us. Maria, you have your hand up. We have 5 minutes for our final question.
So I just wanted to go back to my, you know, without putting too fine a point on it, but I wanted to go back to my thing about marketing and getting yourself out there and letting people see you and being visible, you know, because those messages around how hard it is to hire someone in gravitas, you're back in that very old advert. No one ever got fired for buying IBM.
Yeah.
That's what we're sitting. That's what you're dealing with.
Thank you. I am trying to readmit.
Zaza is back. Yeah,
she's back. I just want to add spotlight to her. Yay! We've got you back. Wonderful. So, last but not least, my final question: what is one change that would have the greatest impact, and who is best placed to make that change? So We have 5 minutes, everyone, briefly.
I just wanted to pick up on something that Nikki was saying, which reflects a thought that I shared with you guys the other day when we were planning. I don't see this necessarily happening, or from an economic perspective, being something that panels will want to do, or establish mediators. But I do think one of the key things that would change the ability of those who were trying to get appointed is if the model was more like a pupil. So I'm not saying that that individual has to be paid, which I know some people would have concerns with, but if that person was the pupil on that panel for a period of time and was essentially sponsored to develop experience, to attend mediations, even if they don't speak in the mediation, talking in the background with the mediator, which I've been lucky enough to do on a number of instances, that means that you are in front of the clients, you are in front of the law firms, but also you enable those individuals to gain confidence that you've walked in the footsteps of somebody they do trust, and that person can then endorse you. And I think that if we created something more akin to that model, and there are lots of challenges in terms of the financial justifications for doing so other than building the future and some level of altruism, I think that that would change the ability of people to progress through. And I know there's problems with the pupillage system, so I don't want to kind of brush those under the carpet, but I do think that would be a big positive step.
So we're going to learn from the bar and have pupils as mediators, and really kind of increase that observation experience that we've all benefited hugely from, but focus that and some altruism to develop the future generations of mediators. Who's next? One thing with the biggest impact, and who's best placed to make it?
I think for us, when I just continue, one thing we've been discussing here is if we put mediators forward, is also to challenge the client, and being first of all clear that you would always put a mix forward, and also give a rationale. What is your policy? What are you doing? And then if you hear back, okay, we want a male, or we just want males, just you have to gently push back and question. I think it's a dialogue which needs, again, you need to be a disruptor to question certain processes. And we just launched a pledge where I think it's important to show a commitment also from law firms, and actually a lot of law firms signed up, and then say, okay, you signed up, are you consistent with your commitment, and in holding them accountable. So I think it's also from the side of the providers, which is quite important to be a sponsor and to contribute to that.
So being a disruptor and being willing to look to support the client in finding genuinely the best mediator, and not just going with tried and tested who are good, but there may be other people who are more suitable for this particular mediation. Great. Zaza, Maria.
Well, I'm going to go back to instead of looking outwards and imagining that other people need to do something for us because we're helpless or we can't do it without assistance, is look inside, build your own self-confidence and belief, and get yourself out there. I mean, I am the best person to look at myself and to find my confidence and to put myself out in the world. So that's, I think, what the best place is.
So we have the power. We need to use our power to stand up and put ourselves out in the world, and to believe in ourselves and make the case for why we are the best mediator to be used in our niche. Yeah. Zaza, last and definitely never least.
Thank you, Mia. So I would just say that I agree with everything that's been said before me, and I think that a combined approach, so the being provocative, the being the disruptor, which could never be said of me, could it, Mia? Never. doing that delicately but firmly at the same time. So not being confrontational, but being inquisitive about, what are the anxieties, what has made you choose this particular mediator, as well as the shadowing. I've just joined the CEDA faculty, and I think that the shadowing process that they have is excellent. So replicating that beyond CEDA. And also what I started out with was this exploration. For me, it was necessity is the mother of invention, that because I knew that I wasn't going to be appointed by the, let's say, more standard commercial mediations as frequently, that I had to look for those niches very early on and to explore other areas. So my last word would just be not to, to shed that diffidence, to believe in yourselves and to go forth looking for new areas to apply your mediation skills. Even if your role isn't a mediator, it may be a facilitator, it may be a bridger, all sorts of terms are used because sometimes people don't want to acknowledge that they're in conflict. So it's just, we're going to have somebody to help us have a conversation, but not call them a mediator, because that would mean an admission of conflict. So go forth, and thank you so much for listening to all of us so attentively, and the questions are so helpful to help us to think further about what we need to do. And definitely all the speakers today, Mia, Martha, Joanna, we're so committed to bringing about this change. So thank you.
We really are. Thank you so much. Great participation. We've got extra suggestions, more on co-mediation, mentoring in the chat. These wonderful, wonderful women. And actually, it was Bill Marsh who said to me quite early on in my mediation career, you need to take your seat as a mediator. And I think that's what Maria and Zaza are saying in some respects in this sort of empowering and believing in yourself. And we've got the disruption, the idea of more pupillage, shadowing. So lots of ideas, lots of thoughts. Thank you all. You've all added to the debate, and thank you all for the thanks in the chat. So we were recording this. This will be available in video and audio, and there'll be more of these. So watch out for them, and watch out for more women in mediation, and we'll have individual interviews with all of these wonderful, wonderful women. It has been such a privilege to be your hosts today and to hear everyone's stories. So thank you so much from me. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Lovely session. Very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.